Here's my summer 2025 weather and climate predictions in a psychic forecast for you, and why I believe the sun is starting to cool. Now, my degree is in meteorology, so for this video, I'm going to be combining intuition with science to bring you a complete and accurate forecast, at least hopefully accurate, for the summer season of 2025 in the psychic forecast. So there's way too much information to keep in my head, so I'm going to be reading from my notes a lot. So anyhow, whatever you believe the reason is for why we're experiencing global warming, we'll touch on that a little bit. And the fact is that 2024 was the hottest year since records have been being kept. That's like over 150 years, I believe. 2023 was the second hottest year, and 2016, which was an El Nino fueled year, was number 3. I don't think this year is going to be the new number 1, and I'll explain again why in a second. So anyhow, so besides things that drive the climate, the sun's output obviously is part of it. We're in the solar maximum now, which means the sun's actually hotter, even though there's more sunspots, because it's more active, more electromagnetically active. So you'd expect these 11-year maxes to be hotter anyways, and certainly it's been this way in this cycle. And also the ENSO, or the El Nino Southern Oscillation, drives the weather. So there's major things that go on in the globe that drive the climate and the weather. Space weather is a big part of it, the sun, but also these warming and coolings of the ocean, specifically El Nino, La Nina pattern is the cooling of the equatorial Pacific region. Space weather also drives climate, as solar winds, plasma bursts, and other things change the magnetosphere and the ionosphere, which changes the troposphere, which is the layer of the atmosphere that drives our weather systems, basically. Also, ocean weather drives the climate, including changes to things like the Gulf Stream, the Pacific Stream, the Labrador Current, to name a few of them. So there's always changing patterns in ocean flows, ocean currents, as well as temperature patterns within the ocean. Things like space weather and ocean weather are not well understood by climatologists yet. So there's a big margin of error when they put out these climate forecasts for the seasons. So basically, everything in weather, like everything in our physical universe, is based on pattern. There's short-term patterns, there's long-term patterns, they all overlap, they all intersect. It is part of the fractal universe that we live in. Everything from the microcosm to the macrocosm is the same patterns, only the timing, the size, and all the relativities are different, but it's the same forces that drive these patterns on all levels. And what changes the tendency of a fractal universe to self-replicate? Its energy, its consciousness, and its frequency. So if we raise the frequency in our consciousness, we can actually help the Earth. And I'll get to that point in a minute also. But let me jump into some of these predictions here. So here's the outlook from now, which it's June, what's the date? June the 6th through August, and in some key areas. So much of the US and Canada, we see the temperatures being above average. Big surprise there, right? Parts of the Midwest to the Southeast could trend cooler than normal, though. And of course, local things will vary. So I could forecast a hot summer, but then like July 20th to the 25th could be very chilly, for example. So, these are just very broad strokes that we're painting on the weather patterns going on in the summer. But anyway, western parts of the southern plains to the west coast, hot and dry. So we see drought conditions maybe expanding in that area. Northeast, though, is interesting because Northeast is likely to show, and that's where I live, I'm in the Catskill Mountains of New York, will likely show more oscillation. So whereas the climate predictions have us substantially warmer than average in the Northeast, I question whether it's going to work out that way. And you may recall I did forecast for the month of June we'd have some June versions of Arctic outbreaks in the Midwest to the southeast and the central part of the country. Certainly, we've been seeing that, but intermixed with some hot weather. We had 2 days in the upper 80s here in the Catskills, which would be a hot day even in mid-July. So it's going to oscillate. I think we're going to trend into more heat, but here in the Northeast, because the jet stream patterns combined with a stronger than average Bermuda high that I believe is going to happen, it's going to cause it to flip. So we may get a week or two where it's very hot, then we may get some unsettled weather for a while. So I think it's going to flip that way. So let me see what else is in my notes. Yeah, so a positive upper, and a positive tilt in the jet stream pattern also can lead to hotter than normal conditions on the East Coast and less storminess as well. But it also opens the path for more hurricanes to intrude into the system, tropical weather, and I'll get to that part in a minute also. So this pattern is going to keep the derechos, those strong lines of thunderstorms, threats higher east of the Mississippi, also in the northern plains, which is technically west of the Mississippi, down through the southeast. The west faces growing drought concerns with monsoon patterns slightly suppressed in some areas. We'll see how that pans out. Parts of the southeast could wind up cooler and wetter than average also. Now, we told you cool, unsettled weather will occur in June from north central the U.S., and this is happening. But I think that will ease by the second week of July. So this pattern, like right now, we're heading into a little bit of a cooler, cloudier period here in the Northeast. Then it's going to warm up later next week. Then it's probably going to cool down again towards the solstice. So I think that this pattern is going to start to ease by the second week of July, basically. And the official climate forecast for a very hot summer on average in the U.S., but there's a wild card that I want to talk about also, which could change the climate predictions big time, and that is volcanoes. The weather models cannot predict the effects of unknown volcanic eruptions, like what we had in, what year was Mount St. Helens? 1980 something, and then the big volcano, which was even bigger in the Philippines, that actually briefly cooled the atmosphere. And you might recall we had early autumns in those years, and things like that. All right, so where were we? So the thing is, the volcanoes eject a lot of smoke and ash into the upper atmosphere that blocks some of the sun, and it cools the atmosphere. But it's briefly. Now, I think it definitely was March when I do the monthly psychic forecast, if you're new here. So the byline for March was the month that the earth will shake, or the month that the earth shook. And what happened was, from January through around the 20th of March, we were actually in below average global activity for earthquakes and volcanoes, earthquakes more than 2.5 magnitude. That flipped on around March 20th, and we've been in an above average cycle since then. Nothing crazy when you look at the patterns over the long term, but still significant. And the interesting thing is, we haven't had an 8.0 earthquake here on the planet, I think, for 5 or 6 years, and we average one a year. So we're due in that respect. So earthquakes, they have plasma releases also. They affect the troposphere. They affect the weather too. So all these things do affect the climate and the weather, basically. So what else? Okay. So that's basically that part. And soon... So I do believe that we're going to see probably at least one major eruption, more than Etna, which up until now is a pyroclastic flow. It's not I don't believe it's a lava release quite yet. Of course, Kilauea is, and it's massive, but I think we're going to see bigger. It could be the super volcano in Italy, around Indonesia, Japan, in that area. Then we have the Pacific Northwest, what's it called? The volcanic activity off the Pacific Northwest. The name escapes me right now, what that is. But anyway, so there's that. Now, hurricane season's likely to be above average from what I'm seeing, but with stronger than expected shear. Like, in other words, I think, like, I'll put it this way. The Climate Prediction Center is forecasting a very active hurricane season. I think it's going to be active, but it may not. The numbers may come in the lower end of their forecast. One of the reasons I do believe there's going to be more shear than forecasted. Shear blows off the tops of hurricanes, suppresses their growth. Saharan dust and winds are likely to be strong, and that suppresses the hurricanes. So it may not be quite as much as what they're showing. But still, the U.S. is very vulnerable this season, especially the Southeast. I mean, the Gulf is always vulnerable. If a hurricane goes into the Gulf, there's only one way out, and that's through land somewhere, right? But I think we're going to see more like off the East Coast, and the way I'm seeing the jet stream patterns evolving could make the Northeast and New England more vulnerable to tropic activity than usual. So, always have a hurricane readiness plan, and always be ready for any kind of natural disaster or event, because they are increasing around the globe. You know the drill. Have your food supplies, ways of getting water, medications, all that good stuff. So anyway, floods and fire will remain a high concern, not just in the U.S., but around the globe. Europe, too, looks to be mainly hot and dry this summer. Exceptions could be Eastern Europe, with the weather pattern could bring more of a polar influence into the eastern part of Europe, I want to say. And the very southwest portion, that'd be like southern Portugal and Spain, and that area may have a little bit more marine influence and cool it down there. But in general, places like the UK, France, Central Europe, all those areas, through Italy, Greece, look to be hot and dry this summer, which has been kind of normal the last few years. Although I don't think last year was as bad there as it was the year prior. But anyway. Also, in Asia and India into northern Africa could see more flooding as an active monsoon pattern sets in. At least that's my forecast. So there could be more rain, but also hotter than normal, I want to say. Australia, New Zealand, this will be your winter down under. Also likely to trend, Australia, New Zealand, also likely to trend high for the winter season down under. Trend high, what did I mean? I think I meant temperatures are likely to trend higher than average. Especially southwest could remain dry. Southwestern portions of Australia, and maybe southern, a lot of the southern in general. But most, I think, of Australia and New Zealand going to trend near or actually above average in precipitation, which can help some of the fire and drought concerns. Though I do think it's still going to be an active time for fire there. I think from Tasmania through southern New Zealand we'll have high incidence of strong cyclones, but the northern New Zealand could be unseasonably warm and dry, with possible exceptions in the far north of both Australia and New Zealand that comes into more of a tropical influence. Also, I see the Indian Ocean cyclone season looks above average, whereas the Pacific, where the Western Pacific typhoon season and the Eastern Pacific hurricane seasons could be near to even slightly below average in those areas. So I don't really have the science to back this up, so this is more intuition. The rest of this forecast is combining what I know about the science as well as what I'm feeling intuitively. And that is the sun going through an actual cooling trend. And I think it kind of started already, but again, the science is saying that really over the last, I think, 5 decades, that the sun has remained more or less the same temperature. There's always going to be minor oscillations through the years. But I feel like this will be cooled down starting recently into the next couple of decades. Now, with the effects that curb global warming on the planet, part of that is through aerosol chemical ejection, better known as chemtrails, geoengineering projects and such. This could tip the scales and actually bring in a mini ice age between 50 and 100 years. Something to keep in mind on. We don't have to worry about this now, but let Mother Nature do her thing, right? It's pure speculation now, but over the past 5 decades or so, no sun, like I said, no changes in the thermal output of the sun's been noted, basically, from what I've seen anyway. And over the long term, when we go like hundreds of thousands, millions of years, the sun's actually gradually getting hotter. But in any event, so these are just patterns of the sun and Earth, which is a closed system. The sun is connected energetically to her planets, and it is a closed system. Even if they're not physically connected, they're very energetically and intimately connected with each other. And even changes in the Earth actually create changes in the sun. Like we've had very large coronal holes in the sun, basically, which is typical in solar maximums. And what happens with that, because the corona, that's pure plasma. The corona of the sun is much hotter than the surface of the sun. There's no helium, there's no hydrogen. It's just basically a nebulous collection of subatomic particles superheated. So if there's a coronal hole, there's a lack of plasma in that area. So the sun's going to try to draw plasma, and it does that from the Earth and other areas of space. So it actually starts to draw some of the plasma that we see from things like earthquakes and volcanoes, as well as nuclear explosions, which release plasma also. But we'll talk about that in another video maybe. But in any event, over the long term, the sun actually getting more. Okay, so everything goes through cycles. So we could be heading into a period of global cooling. There's cycles upon cycles upon cycles. And whatever your views are on climate change, the Earth is warmer right now. And it's been shown through models. It's been 99.9% proven that carbon dioxide emissions, methane, and other things are causing a very, very brief spike of global warming that we're experiencing right now. And even scientists like Greg Braden or staunch opposition to man-made global warming admits that there is some influence. Again, as far as the Earth goes, the Earth is always going to try to maintain balance anyway. So if we're bringing more greenhouse gases into the Earth is going to try to balance that. And if the Earth's getting too hot, it will try to balance that. It will produce more clouds and rain, as one example. And other effects in the upper atmosphere can mitigate some of the heating effects of the sun also. Remember, the Earth's intelligent, and she's trying to help us. All we need to do is we don't have to go through any politically driven, motivated, drastic changes in the world. We just have to balance maybe our carbon emissions on the planet. Doesn't mean eliminate it. Maybe balance the cutting of trees, which are huge oxygen producers and consume carbon dioxide in the grassland. So just a little bit of global cooperation and balancing things out and being kind to the Earth. It's going to be okay. We're not going to, none of the doomsday prophecies, from our friends, the scientists and climatologists, are going to happen. But at the same time, it's foolish to ignore it, in my opinion. It is happening, and some changes in their habits have to happen. So in any event, remember, the Earth is alive. She's always trying to balance things, including man-made changes, so the atmosphere will adjust to these things, basically, to help balance global temperatures. At the end of the day, the more we can connect with and work with the Earth's frequency, the more the Earth is going to heal and balance. The Earth has a pulse. It has a rhythm. It's expressed in the Schumann frequencies, amongst other things, basically, or other frequency outputs. The effect of our heart and bodies, as well as the Earth heart, is a natural lectogram, right? Earth and heart's a natural lectogram. They have the same letters. So basically, what I'm just trying to say, I'll do this in English now, is the Schumann resonance, it's, what is it, 7.8 hertz? Yeah, it's a very low frequency, energy. But it is cyclical, and the Schumann resonance taps into some of the plasma changes, the electrical changes, like thunderstorms. But because our consciousness is also frequency, there's some alignment or some belief, and including myself, that there's some alignment with consciousness and effects on the Schumann resonance or Schumann frequencies also. So remember, there's no separation, and this unfortunate belief that we are not intimately connected with our Mother Earth is what's leading to imbalances and problems. Indigenous people, including the Native Americans, knew this, and they honored the Earth, and the Earth honored them, basically. Um, so that's kind of what we have to talk to, and I'll do another whole video on the Schumann frequency because that's a really fascinating subject, and it's an important marker of spiritual ascension, but it's largely misunderstood by the spiritual community at large. I want to shed some light on that and how we can work with that for our own ascension and understand what's happening on the planet. And the other thing that's going on is there's a lot going on beneath the earth, and seismologists are really sounding the alarms in different areas. The Mississippi, off the coast of Oregon and Washington to Alaska, around Japan. I also feel like Russia and China is in line for some huge seismic activity, and they're noticing there's increased flow in energy, there's increased magma flow, so there's more volcanic activity that's coming up, and that can potentially affect our lives. So on this end screen, I'll post a video on the New Madrid fault and what this means to the Mississippi. And on this side, or I might flip them, I'll do more on a potential tsunami threat in both Japan, but more succinctly in the New Cascadia fault off of Washington and Oregon. So thank you. Hopefully that this is helpful. Please like this video, subscribe, and we'll see you